Calling to order the Bargersville Redevelopment Commission for April 14, 2022. Would everybody please join me for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call, left to my right.
James Pfeiffer, present.
Robin Golden, present.
Eric Prime, present.
CJ from Court, present.
Rob Daniels, present. Fantastic. All right, new business, the REA presentation regarding the downtown plaza.
Yep, give me just a second. I'm pulling that up for you.
Okay.
And if you guys want to go ahead and and I will turn these on, maybe the other way around. Sorry, technical difficulties here this morning. There we go. There we go. Perfect. Maybe. Come up here. Okay, great. Go ahead.
To shade, it looks like it's
Try.
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cecil Finland. I'm a landscape architect with Redevelopment Associates. We've been commissioned by the community to help lead the design of a new public space in the downtown. So we're very excited about the opportunity to work with your community. With me today, I've got Andrea. She's an intern with us at REA. Pat Stout is also from our office. He's been working on your project as well, but he's home with some sick children today, so he wasn't able to make it. But what we wanted to do is just give you an update on the process and where we're at. Also get your feedback on some of our initial thoughts. We have I guess I would call it a project steering committee that we've been working with throughout this process. And we met last week to share some of our initial thoughts. This first page that you're seeing up on the screen is really just an inventory and analysis of the site and kind of the context of things that are going on around here. When we look at the site in the context of the downtown, there's some important things we want to think about. It's key intersections. So along Harriman, along Main, along 135 and 144. There's some key intersections that are really kind of focal points that kind of lead your eye into the downtown and into this space. I should note that the space is outlined with the red outline there. A little bit hard to see, so I apologize. The other thing that's very important is the railroad. The railroad kind of bisects the downtown, but it serves as a major edge along the edge of this public space. And then the other thing that's important are all the downtown buildings that are occurring on the east side of the space. And I should note that north is to the right in case that's throwing anybody off. But those are all kind of key things that we want to talk about. The site has 3 existing structures on it, 2 existing pole barns and a grain bin. One of the existing pole barns is in poor condition. And one of the existing pole barns is in good condition, but it actually extends across the entire width of the property. Every downtown site has a challenge. This one is no different, but that existing pole barn actually extends beyond the property line slightly, not very much, on the west side and almost all the way to the public right of way on the east side. So you can imagine that building really bisects that space. That's an important note as we get into the presentation. So. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we've developed 3 different concepts, 2 of which are kind of a slight variation on one another, and one which is quite unique. This first concept, concept 1, really takes a look at creating the most out of this very linear space that we have and developing rooms along it. All the spaces kind of, or all of the concepts you'll see today do that. When we talk about what a downtown space should be doing, it should be attracting families, adults, people of all ages and generations to come to your community to recreate and enjoy what's going on in your downtown and hopefully spend $1 or $2 while they're there. So there are some key things that we can do to help attract people into downtown. One of those is set up flexible spaces that can be used for a variety of things such as markets, festivals, performances, making sure we have activities for groups of all ages. So that might be play for children. It might be adult gaming, like outdoor sports tables, cornhole, ping pong for older adults. It might be making sure that we can extend the use of the space throughout all seasons of the year. So that might include the incorporation of a fire pit or setting the infrastructure up for a winter ice rink. What's key to a space like this, beyond its initial design, is the program. That's what will attract people to your community and to your downtown. So in this concept, if we start at the south, which is on the left, what we've designed here is kind of an arrival plaza. And the arrival plaza is intended to complement the existing farmers market that occurs here on a regular basis. I know it's probably hard to read, but there's a little gray square on the left or on the upper side of that arrival plaza, and that's a small restroom structure, 2 unisex bathrooms, and a storage area or concessions area. It's kind of a flexible space. It could be used for storage, it could be used for concessions, it could be for ticketing if you have an event that you wanted a ticket for. But on the back side of that are 2 public restrooms that could service the farmers markets during a normal farmers market event. Right to the north of that, or to the right, there's a small space for adults thinking that might have a small fire pit with some flexible seating and a couple of, I would call them the equivalent of a porch swing, where somebody could grab a drink, walk across into the park, sit down with a group of 6 or 7 friends, and just socialize there in that space. As we kind of go through that space, the park opens up, and you kind of are revealed with this additional adult area that might have a couple of ping pong tables. Obviously, children can play in here as well. Cornhole set, there's outdoor foosball, there's all kinds of outdoor activities that can be incorporated into a space like this. But you'll also see the use of some landform to create topography. It creates a natural place for people to sit, but it also helps sculpt these rooms along this path. There's a path that goes up along the railroad, and there's a path that follows the right-of-way line. Just to the north, you'll see a larger gray square, which is a outdoor pavilion. And the idea is that that outdoor pavilion is a flexible structure. It can be used as a picnic pavilion, but it might also be used for service, a double purpose as a performance shelter. So you can imagine on the north side of that performance shelter, there's a large gathering lawn. During an event, there could be a small band playing under that shelter, which is approximately 30 feet square. And you could have people seated out on the lawn, kind of looking back towards that performance shelter. There's also a small access up to the railroad. In case there's a marketing or tourism opportunity to bring a train in there, you could have an access to the railroad if that's something that's desired. As we go further to the north, you see the area in the blue. That is a small children's play area. One of the structures that's really unique to the space is the grain bin, and it's a gateway into the community if you're traveling along 144. So it's something that we wanted to keep in the design and incorporate in the design. And so in this concept, that's actually looking at repurposing that so that it kind of surrounds a play element. It becomes a gateway for 144, but we were able to create kind of a climbing structure within the center of it. Now, I will say this is a concept and it needs to be vetted through structural engineering and a lot of things, but it's a neat way of incorporating kids into this space. And then there's some other kind of agrarian themed play elements in there, just these ideas of large cylinders that might represent like a round bale, or these structures that might represent things you might have found in on a farm in Indiana. And then as you go further to the north, you'll see this access out to 144. Immediately to the northwest of the railroad track, there's an existing trail that ends, and that's a critical connection. We want to make sure we make that connection, then we create a soft connection, or I'm sorry, a safe connection across the railroad. But this really becomes a gateway. So in this concept, this area to the north of the grain bin really becomes kind of an idea of a naturalized Indiana landscape. So you kind of have the cultivated lawn out towards the street, and as you move towards the grain bin, it becomes a little more natural. So you start to see some of the trees that you would find on a natural, in a natural Indiana landscape. So like red buds and dogwoods that are going to bloom would be beautiful in the spring, and then you kind of mature into some of these larger trees, which help spray the grain bin. So concept 2, as I mentioned, one of the challenges of this space is its narrow nature. first concept had a set of parallel walks, one that went up the railroad, one that went along the railroad right of way. So this concept really looked at keeping the walk out of the right of way and then maximizing the space between the right of way and the railroad. It's similar program of elements. So at the south end or to the left, you have an arrival plaza, and then that there is a shelter there. It could be used to complement the farmer's market that's going on, but it could also be your rentable facility. Immediately north of that, in this scheme, is the playground. So again, it's convenient to parking, which is one thing that I think is an advantage over the first concept. Although the first concept did have some parking adjacent to the street. And then as you go towards the north, you get into that adult play area where you have kind of two ping pong tables. Or again, it could be cornhole, or it could be foosball, it could be any number of things. Immediately north of that, in items number 6, is a gathering lawn. And what we're looking at doing here is creating kind of some topography in the site. So you can imagine the left side of that lawn slopes up to an apex, and then it slopes back down to the north. So the left side of that slope allows people to sit and watch what's going on in the playground or at the adult kind of play area. And the right side of that lawn, or the north side of the lawn, becomes an amphitheater for what is the stage over by the grain bin. So in this concept, we're really using the grain bin as a background to a stage. So there would be a shelter that would sit to the south of the grain bin, and the grain bin becomes the backdrop for all performances, which we think is a really cool idea and would be really unique to Bargersville. It also helps celebrate that history and that unique element. One thing I didn't mention is right next to the stage in all these concepts is a small dance floor, because that's something that is important during performances, but it can also serve the dual purpose for disabled seating and, make sure we are ensuring accessibility through the site and up to the stage. In this concept, there's a small structure right next to the grain bin, which could have some public restrooms and or concessions. And then at the far north end of this concept, we kind of looked at 3 different treatments for this gateway. This concept looked at the idea of a community garden. So what you're seeing up here are individual plots that could be rented, wouldn't have to be, could be maintained by the city, but it's kind of this idea of little agricultural plots, farm plots. It could be food, it could be perennials, it could be annuals, it could be any number of things. But it's kind of creating some order at this north end that also inserts some color and some green. Again, consistent with all the concepts, we want to make sure we create access over to 144 and across the railroad track. And then also similar to all the concepts, we've created a very distinct edge treatment along the right of way, inserting a tree lawn so that as you come in on Baldwin Street from 144, you've got this gateway into the downtown that's very colorful.
Can I ask a quick question about that one?
Sure.
The open area to the east of the playground on the Baldwin Street, is there a reason why the landscaping didn't go on down when the walkways on further?
Yeah, so one thing we wanted to do is make sure that we have access across Baldwin. We know that there's some new development that's going to happen across Baldwin Street, and there's some redevelopment of some of those existing buildings. So we're just trying to think of strategically where you might want to break the green space and allow access for, it could be a food truck that might park along that curb line that could service events. It could be people wanting to bring in items to the picnic shelter for a reunion or a wedding or whatever that might be. So it's just creating some access points along the street. And you'll also see we've created a crosswalk at the south end so that we have a safe crossing point there for people to go across the street.
Okay, anything else? I'm good.
This last concept is a variation of the one before. So in this concept, we really look at pushing the playground down towards the existing parking lots. Again, one of the most important things for families who are using play is convenience parking. If you're a mother and you've got 3 children, you don't want to have to walk from the parking lot 600 feet to the north. You want it to be as convenient as possible. So this concept pulls the playground down towards the south end to make it convenient for access. And then the kind of adult and, multi-generational area is shown in the red just to the right of the blue. And so in this area, again, you have more flexible seating, you have a small shelter. That could be a picnic shelter, it could have a couple of unisex bathrooms in it, and we have that same kind of adult recreation area. Just to the north of that, where we had this sloped lawn in the previous concept, we've actually created almost like a bleacher in this location. So you can imagine, we were thinking of using materials similar to, probably not railroad ties because of what they're made from and how they're chemically treated, but something like reminiscent of a railroad tie that would kind of stack up and create these tiered seating opportunities for people to move back towards the south. But that also elevates the lawn so that it creates an amphitheater towards the north, towards the stage structure, which is shown in the same location adjacent to the grain bin. In this concept, another option for treatment of the north end is this idea of just kind of a sculpted landscape that is kind of these architectural berms. It might look like almost like lawn pillows. It could be planted, but it's kind of this idea again of this very intentional landscape and gateway treatment for people looking to the north. And then the north end of the grain bin is framed by some very colorful and nice ornamental trees. So that's a quick explanation of the three concepts and where we're currently at. The kind of phase of design we're in right now, we're looking for feedback from what you like, what you don't like about each of these concepts. And then from this point, what we're going to do is going to generate a preferred concept. And then that will allow us to narrow in on some of the costs for the space, but it'll also help us develop kind of the next level of renderings, which are the fun things like the 3D illustrations and things like that. So with that, I'll open it up to the group for questions, concerns, things you like, things you don't like. We're not married to anything here. This is your space. We want it to be successful. We want it to be Bargersville. So we're looking for honest feedback.
What's the size of that plow land again?
It's about 600 feet long, and at its widest, it's about 80 feet. At its narrowest, it gets down to about 30, 35 feet.
Is it about acre and a half?
Probably an acre and a half, yeah.
0.79.
Oh, yeah.
To be precise. Give a perspective on like long-term maintenance of these. I mean, I like concept 2 and 3 more, but I like concept 1. It just seems like there's more things that could more maintenance over time, fire pits and.
Yeah, I mean, things like that, definitely, they have mechanical systems are more maintenance. That's not to say that you couldn't have a fire pit in any one of these concepts, but, that's for one reason that, well, I know the town didn't really have interest in a water feature, but water features are a ton of maintenance. So there's no water feature in this system. Honestly, probably the most maintenance is just in, if you have a building that has to be winterized.
I'm just thinking like game tables and, which, there's trash.
Well, those can be made out of, a lot of them are made out of concrete, so they're precast concrete, so they're pretty durable. They also, you can get them out of metal, but we try to specify industrial strength for commercial grade material. Otherwise, in order to keep costs down, I think we're looking at, in terms of materials for pavements and things, we've shown concrete, we've shown pavers, both of which should be pretty minimal in terms of their maintenance requirement. Honestly, a lot of those maintenance will probably be in the landscape too, depending on kind of what concept you guys want to go with.
I understand there's a nice separation to the north, but specifically speaking, I think it would be a waste to have a garden thing for the community, for our community. We were downtown Indianapolis maybe, but
Yeah.
community full farms. You only look like you're just talking about a little square, so
Right.
people are having all those in their backyard.
Well, they can also look unkept. So that's kind of the other thing I was has.
But annuals, perennials, whatever, who done by the city, the town, I should say, or the slope, or the pillows, whatever you call it. I understand that area having some.
The other thing we talked about last week with the steering committee is, I suspect at some point in the future, that area north of 144 may not be a field any longer. So not knowing what that may be in the future yet, I think it's important to leave some flexibility in that space. We were hesitant. It's kind of an awkward space because you're out between the railroad and the road. But I think if whatever happens north of 144, if that redevelops in the future, I think it's important to have some flexibility in that space because it could become something slightly different. Which is also kind of the reason we targeted our investment down towards the commercial area.
I believe, was it 2019 summer, the last time we had any events in front of the town hall, as far as the music festivals, the music festivals? Did we have anything last year?
We had the farmer's market last year, but we did not have
any
concerts last year.
I mean, I understand the thought, but is it really realistic to expect, even 2 years ago, could we fit one of the events that was here over there? I mean, is this community platform stage, is it so small that it's almost non-functional?
We asked the question was asked last week about how many people could that lawn accommodate. We talked about two scenarios. If everybody's got blankets, you're taking up an area that's at least 5 feet square, 25 square feet. That would accommodate about 200 patrons if they're on blankets. If they're seated like we're looking at right here, that goes up to about 300.
Well, you're talking about like rows and.
You're talking about rows, but about 10 square feet per person, which gives you, the width of your body and 5 feet in front of you.
There's probably gonna be blankets and chairs, and like what you see at Mallow Run or something.
Right. So you're probably somewhere between that 200 to 300 range in just the lawn area.
Mark, the other thing is if we were doing a larger event over there, we would also close down the street, which would give us more flexibility.
I got you.
And parking.
And we would have the option to extend further south into the parking.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that might be something we want to look at too, is, we've shown that tree lawn along the gathering lawn, but maybe that needs to become a little more hardscape through there in case you do shut down Baldwin Street. That those events can kind of bleed over into the street during those times.
I mean, you alluded to the terrace section. That's not what the bleachers, it should be more like terracing.
Yeah, so I mean, we're imagining they're like seating height, so 12 to 18 inches. And then we did show them a little deeper, so it could be 3 feet deep. That way somebody could walk, but we're only going up about 3 feet. When I say terrace, I'm not talking about 10 feet of elevation change. I'm talking maybe 3 feet total.
But it looks like the big decision from your two concepts is where to put the stage and where to put the playground. Do you want to put
That's kind of the biggest variation. I also think that another key difference is this one path along the edge of the right of way, which helps us keep space between that path and the railroad. The first concept, which has two parallel paths, really kind of starts to choke down the width of your spaces that you have to work with.
So going with what Mark was saying, if the stage is where the green bin's at, then you have more space to involve in for performance. But, then you're giving up a playground in the location.
The other advantage I see to these last two concepts is with that, again, with the play down closer to the parking, I think that makes it much more convenient for parents who might be driving to downtown. Obviously, we want people to walk as much as we can and for bike, but the reality of it all is there's going to be a lot of people to drive.
Personally, I like this concept a lot.
Yeah, I would take the tree area from concept 1 and put that on 13, because I'm with Mark, I don't think we need the community gardens. It's a pretty rural area anyway. People have plenty of ground to do their own. And I'm not sure if the berms look like the town maintenance folks would hate us and mow those. So the tree area, I like that concept where it's shady and an area to walk through and easier to maintain. I might extend the playground area into this just up to the restrooms, because I think that's going to be the busiest daily spot is the kids coming and playing. So I would maybe use more space for playground and less for whatever the area 5 is. Otherwise, I like this one a lot.
we have, I mean, well, I don't want to speak out of turn, but if you guys need a little bit of time, if you want to take a week or so and review these concepts and, give us some more feedback, that's perfectly fine too. We're flexible. We're working with you guys at your pace, so.
That's where Robin and I, we landed last week on this too. We really like this one.
This one, yeah,
Yeah, and I agree, the planting the berms, you're not gonna be able to get a tractor on there, probably you're gonna have to weed those, which is gonna be a pain.
so as a landscape architect, do you have a perspective on what trees would go in if you put them? If you used option one, that whatever that is, that northern piece.
Yeah, well, in general, I was thinking, again, trying to stick with this idea of kind of a native Indiana thing. So I was thinking maybe dogwoods and red buds kind of on the lower ornamental side. But then when we get up something more like beech, maple, oak, we don't want something, the thing about oaks is about the acorn.
Yeah.
So we try to be cognizant of what the fruit or the seed is that they're cropping. Because most people don't like tripping over acorns on sidewalks or.
I think long term, that would pretty neat coming into the city too.
And we had also discussed making sure for keeping the grain bin, that there's clear line of sight, if you're coming down 144, to put a mural or something that again, kind of directs people in.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't talk about. We had shown a couple precedent images last week. There's some really cool things that have been done in other places where they have this very bold lettering that could be mounted to the side of the grain bin that could say Bargersville or downtown, or it could be a mural for the community. It could be a lot of different things, and that's kind of the detail we'll get into next.
Is the primary purpose for this to be a gathering place more for adults, whether it's the festivals that we started, or ping pong tables, or, we have other places. Does Windish have the children's, the park? Am I saying that right? What's the park over?
Windish has playground and it
No,
also
we
has.
have over by the church playground.
It's
Wood-
Whit
Second generation family would ride kids. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm just asking, are we trying to be too many things in a small area without trying to really be narrow and deep and focus on what we intend this to truly be, which would be more of a total community gathering?
Right.
Instead of sprinkle, trying to do some ping pong, trying to do a playground. I'm just asking that
Yeah.
question.
Well, I think from our
Commission
vantage
as well.
point,
I mean, to the commission as well.
So are you thinking like maybe concept 3 without a playground?
I don't know, I'm trying
kinda
to
with
put
you,
an
I mean,
awful lot
yeah.
in there. I like Baldwin, I like closing that off and the thought of walking and tents up and down Baldwin as far as booths and a whole community type thing. And maybe when we do that, we have plenty of room with the parking going all the way to the south. I'm just brainstorming.
I think that's where, what CJ and I talked about, is there's several things from each one of these that we like. And that's kind of what we need to do, is just come together and figure out what we need to kind of, not what we need to add, what we need to enlarge, and, I'm kind of with you, Mark, with the ping pong tables and things like that. I'm not necessarily married to having that kind of stuff. I do think there needs to be a playground
I do too,
area,
yeah.
a small one. I mean, it doesn't have to be large.
Look at my grandkids, I'd be the one to go in there just to help them while other things are going on. I mean,
Yeah.
Even if it's small, it helps with an 18-month-old.
right. Well, and if you have parents that are out there to see a performance, their children's not going to have the same attention span that they do. So it's nice to be able to go back and forth and have it convenient, and have a clear line of sight.
One thing I did want to ask you after I looked at all of these, it seems that across from every one of the playground concepts is an open
Yeah.
area to the street. I almost want there to be a hard stop with landscaping or something, because
There
it seems
actually
like it's
is.
just the sidewalk straight up to the street.
Yeah, we can shift the sidewalk so that it's not a direct connection. There are actually landscape beds. I believe, in each of the concepts that's
There was
separated.
one that it was
You
just
just
kind of open.
move the crosswalk here and open it here and then close that off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Really, I guess what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can just see a 2 or 3-year-old just starting, because
Yeah.
it just blends right into the
Sure.
street for them. You know, and just to move that entry, I think that's gonna be a big thing for me anyway, in any concept.
And this may or may not be the big parking area.
Okay.
So that really would, if that's the crosswalk coming into that. the
Okay,
center
so
of there.
there is the new building coming in just to the north of the building with the red roof.
Yeah.
It's replacing.
Yeah.
It's replacing.
Okay.
The footprint's about the same.
Would you guys go out there and like walk around on the site to see, I mean, it even probably looks bigger on this screen than it probably even really is.
Well, as I said, once you get this developed, the things always look bigger in plan than they are when they actually are developed. So
Just walking around, I mean, I'm assuming you guys.
we have, yeah, we've been out there quite a bit. Spent quite a bit of time out there. Again, the challenge of this is it's so long and narrow. So when we think about like the stage, we can certainly extend the lawn, but that panel before it slopes up, that's about 100 feet. So just thinking about the scale of the stage and the distance that you're viewing the performance, there's some proportions that we're trying to maintain so that it's comfortable to view what's going on.
So you're saying you don't want to go too much further south than.
Yeah, I think we could go a little bit further south, or if, for instance, you guys said, well, we don't really like the idea of this terrace bleacher thing, just make that all a little flat lawn, and then if it needed to, if the performances or the seating needed to bleed over into that plaza area, you know, that would allow views all the way through. Because right now, if you have this 3-foot tall bleacher, you're obviously, your view is obstructed to the stage.
I would love that. I think that's great because it breaks it up and kind of delineates between the play area and the performance area.
Yeah, I agree.
And it adds a little.
It does add some visual interest and creates some.
How hard is it to move that silo?
Well, we haven't looked at that, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
even if you moved it 30 feet to the north,
Yeah,
tucked in there just a little bit, I don't know, I'm just
we
asking.
can investigate that. We had, when we started this, we consulted a couple different structural engineers because we were trying to decide how much do we want to engage people with the silo, or can we change the silo to be more?
Is it a
It
concrete
does,
floor?
yeah, it's elevated about
Never mind.
30 inches. And the
I'm not a
structural,
farmer,
Yeah.
maybe gravel.
the structural engineers almost said that it would be cheaper to build a
Oh, yeah.
reminiscent silo than it would be to structurally enhance this one to support, people being inside of it.
Oh, I got you.
I like it to be in the backdrop of the stage.
I do too.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Yeah, I like that.
On an angle too, if you move it too far with 144, it's going to be sticking out there potentially.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I thought what you mean, yeah. I mean, when's it gonna get done?
Yeah, that's what I was at, yeah, I
You
mean,
wanna talk
that
about
was in the back of my mind a little bit was like, I mean, that forego, some of the more complex stuff, just to.
I agree with that sidewalk, removing that from the west, and giving some more space.
Maybe talk about getting more space too, and maybe not having ping pong tables. What about moving number 6 back a little?
We can do that too, yeah.
Yeah, I would expand the playground to the restrooms and move that back a little bit. We'll just kind of lose that middle, that 5 area. Because I think that's going to be the least used.
Another question I had for town or parks department, would there be a need for any sort of like a ticketing area in the front? You had that in the first concept. Would there be a need for that? Anybody?
You can always put up a tent
Yeah.
Well,
if you really need it. I don't.
Where there was one in the second concept here, I think.
Well, the very first one up front,
Yeah, you had always.
Yeah.
a little structure that you could have kind of.
We're also thinking concessions or like, again, just a multi-purpose building a little bit closer to the stage, but we had also maybe discussed whether you could use the silo for any type of storage or something like that. I mean, that's still on the budget, obviously, but.
I don't know, the biggest event we have going now is what, death and taxes? And they just do tables, I mean, and it's, you kind of go through.
It's probably the easiest, cheapest. Put a pop-up tent.
And you get the food truck area, you can bring a beer truck or whatever.
yeah, we've seen other communities, and again, it varies by community. We've seen some communities have a small concessions area, and they've actually brought in a private vendor to, we had one community we worked with, they had a shaved ice kind of place that went in there, and that's kind of evolved into now they sell walking tacos and hot dogs and things like that. But we've got another one where they put a cafe, just a small coffee shop in there. And
The town is not interested in getting into concessions. I don't even need to go to the board on that. I can tell you that.
Facility of food trucks is great.
Yeah.
well, that's the main thing. I make sure you have airport power, it's strategically located, so that if you do need the power or if there's power, it's there.
So the area 5, is that the ping pong tables and all that? Are you getting rid of that, or you're just saying you're that part of the south?
I think they get rid of the ping pongs and move the terrace back.
So I would tell you, if you've been to Carmel, that area is probably the most used.
Ping
Their
pong
outdoor plaza, between kids and adults. That's probably, surprisingly, they have outdoor billiards, and between those are used the most.
Where do you put like the equipment for that stuff?
It just sits out.
Just sits down.
The nets on those tables are steel.
Yeah.
So it's not, and the tables are concrete. But that's the other thing, that little building or storage area could be used for, that's maybe where you keep your paddles. Or, or.
I mean, it'll be the middle of winter and people will be out there using that from ages of like 3 or 4 all the way up to 50, 60, 70. I mean, it's kind of amazing, to be honest, to see that.
Yeah, my wife and I were in Fort Collins last fall, and I forget the name of the big brewery. There's several, but there's one very large brewery, and they have an outdoor space outside. And they had cornhole, they had ping pong, and people just went in and bought beer, went out, sat. They would go out and play ping pong. I mean, it was really cool. And as you mentioned, Midtown Plaza, Carmel, that's kind of the same thing. People use that space all the time.
But from a sheer number of people at their town, as a proportion to the total number of people there that are gonna use it, I mean, the sheer number of people that are gonna be in and around this area at noontime is dwarfed by what's at Carmel.
Right.
I mean,
But do you think, is that gonna be the law? I mean, I feel like as you, P&L continues, population growth continues, Coffee House 5 opens.
Taxan,
Yeah, it feels like it's just only gonna
I
grow.
would agree.
Yeah.
I mean, you could always just have it be more open gathering space and then
And say those things can
have
be
flexibility to put that stuff in.
Yeah.
Or from a budgetary
Going
standpoint.
with sawhorses and a piece of plywood.
The key is flexibility. So if you have the flexibility, then you can add those things later. Or maybe do a trial and one, you put one out there. And if it's successful, maybe then you invest in the commercial grade ping pong or something.
I think concept 3 is awesome. I mean, we could sit here and go through the whole thing and we're.
Yeah.
I like what you guys did. It's cool.
So what is the product? What is the next steps?
Well, I think you and CJ and I ought to get together and kind of
Yeah,
come up
we
with.
probably, now that we all more or less agree that 3 is kind of the platform or how we want to lay it out, it's probably, I don't know, Cecily, tell me, it's probably getting the details on the playground, that functional space. It sounds like
Okay, word, right? Even how that you guys have it, if that's gonna
Yeah.
be going, and it seems like it's pretty flexible.
right.
Yeah, I think if you guys can just, I've heard it and I know Andrew is taking notes over there, so, but if you can just give us your thoughts, like we like the north end from concept 1. We'd like to expand the playground and narrow down the adult area. You can give us that feedback, we can run with that
Okay.
and come up with a preferred concept and then present it back to everybody.
I don't want to speak for the board, but I think we've delegated to Robin and CJ the authority to do the detail work. And I'm comfortable if they've heard what we've said today, so.
And just from a qualification, I don't want you guys to think anything I said is what I think should be changed. I was just, I'm just
Can we do everything?
How many feet do you want there?
Let's do it, I'm ready.
Yeah, 'cause I mean,
Draw it out and we'll get it.
well, that's the danger. We could all sit here Exactly. Tweak this to the.
Well, in general, you guys were very in sync between what we heard last week and what we heard today.
Yeah, so.
I think CJ, sometime maybe this week or within the
Yeah, I
next
don't
week to
think
2
we
weeks.
sit around on this. I think.
Yeah, we'll get back in touch with you. and
Sure.
Give you the laundry list.
That sounds great. So thank you guys for your time.
Thanks, Cecil.
Thank
Take care. Thanks.
All right, next on the hit parade, the TIF management report.
You guys- Are you just gonna say that it's been filed?
Yeah, so I can just say,
Or
so
it will be filed?
it will be fine.
Okay.
Yes. She will after the meeting today. She's gonna file it after the meeting today.
I'll file it.
Yeah, they did. It wasn't us.
Yeah. In your packets today, you have the annual TIF management report prepared by Baker Tilly. This is an annual report that is required for you to file. And after this meeting, it will be filed by our accounting department with the state. So we wanted to present it to you so you had an opportunity to see it before we do file out with the state.
And we need it to be reflected in the minutes that
Yes.
it was presented to you.
We'll let Heidi enter any specifics on the report.
It's all reporting on prior year information, so things that happened last year, revenues.
And this was based on that discussion we had on whether you would do this.
Yeah, in years past,
This is
the
the
town has done it and we've
result of
reviewed it, but it honestly has taken longer in years past. So.
Yeah, so I'm just connecting dots.
Do we need to take official action to authorize the filing of this or not?
Do not.
Anybody have any questions? All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay, yeah, next order of business is financing options for property purchase.
These are the same numbers you've received in the past, so if you have the,
They should be in their packets as well.
oh, it's during your packet.
Sorry.
Okay, so, as we have discussed in prior meetings, I presented these numbers to you guys back in November, just as kind of a high level overview of what your options are. Obviously, you're moving through the due diligence process still with the land purchase, and that is up, I believe, in June, and then you'll be ready to take some action as far as the financing goes. I have not updated these numbers at this point because I just want to discuss kind of in high level what direction you want to move towards, and then we can revise these. I think one of the big questions that's on the table is with the plaza project that was just described, kind of the timing of when that will be ready to be financed, and if you have a desire to try to mix that in with the land purchase. The scenarios that I had put together here, scenario 1 was the land purchase plus the plaza infrastructure, and scenario 2 was just the land purchase. And these financial options are structured around the existing TIF that you guys have been generating, and kind of maxing out that existing TIF that you've been generating to come up with some numbers. And so I would say that your existing TIF stream, though it has not been updated yet, based on what it has been, cannot fully support both the land purchase and the plaza project, which again, we've talked about that before. And so in scenario 1, if you want to flip to page 4, you'll see towards the bottom of, or like the middle of the page, the illustrated project funding, that we have a bond, that taxable tax increment revenue bonds component, and then illustrated cash on hand component. That is essentially the shortfall of what the existing TIF could support through bonds and the project cost needs that you have. meaning you would have to come up with that amount of cash on hand to cover both projects. Are there other funding sources that the town might want to utilize? Maybe, for the plaza project. I know the main goal for the land purchase was to utilize the existing TIF and what's happening with that. And so I just wanted to talk about these concepts in high level, get some direction from you guys, and then we can start fine tuning the numbers a little bit more tightly, get the TIF updated. And kind of go from there. So I don't know if you want me to walk through this in more detail, but that really is kind of the overview of it.
Well, based upon our current financial situation, what is your recommendation to do scenario 2 as a more sustainable?
So there would obviously be efficiencies if you know you need to finance the plaza project to try to do them together.
Right.
You know, that will take a little bit more discussion with Julie and team to see if there are other revenue streams that the town has that they want to utilize for the plaza project, or kind of what the goals are as far as financing that project to come up. Obviously, you don't necessarily want to use, if you would have 1.1 million of cash on hand, you wouldn't necessarily want to spend out all of that cash. So if we could find an annual, a revenue stream that the town would be willing to kind of pledge on an annual basis for the financing, would probably make more sense, just because the town has a lot of projects going on right now. So leveraging any revenue streams really at this point probably makes the most sense. So I don't know if you guys have, at council levels, have talked about it at all yet or not.
We had some big discussions about the park fees and using some of that funding for some of the infrastructure, I thought, a while back, but I could be mistaken. Maybe that's all going to be routed to Cap Art. I don't know what the current allocation is for that.
We're funding Kephart through cash and a bond. That got approved.
We are collecting with that park impact fee on every new.
That's never.
That can only be utilized for certain things. So you're limited to what.
So
We use the park impact fee to buy that ground. Because you can use it to buy ground, trails, and to do a study, and that's about it.
Okay.
what are our options? I mean, like, have we ever explored corporate sponsorships or?
That's all on the table.
Okay.
We just probably need to spend some time going through the numbers and then figuring out. I don't even have that, so I don't know.
So you could easily fund the land purchase from the TIF, from your existing TIF revenue stream.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
1.5, I just.
And that's not assuming any cash contribution from your TIF fund currently. Again, that would be kind of keeping that aside for, if you need to fund a portion of that plaza project.
Just the land.
The
I mean, if we just, what you said, just the land,
2.1 million,
that's the total bond.
what's the total bond?
You said that's what it would be if it's.
That's option 2.
Yeah.
So on page 7 represents, so it would take a bond issue of, let's say 2.5 million to get you to the 2.1 million.
Did those guys give you any perspective on, I mean, if we moved at as fast a pace as possible, when the construction could start, and roughly any idea of what? We haven't gotten there yet. Did we give them a ballpark figure of what we wanted to spend? Was it in line with what the? It was $1 million.
Yeah, that's what we said that was the basic idea of what we were looking at.
We
know what the CPI numbers come back, that might be $3.5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, on these numbers too, the interest rates that are in here are stale at this point, if you're aware of what's going on in the world. The municipal bond market follows along with treasuries, and FOMC at every one of their meetings, which they have, their next one's in May, and then they have 5 more after that. They're anticipating raising interest rates another 25 basis points at least at each one of those meetings. So these rates, I mean, they're gonna go up at least 75 basis points probably from what I showed you in November.
So, I mean, I don't know, it would seem to me then, why not go ahead and meet with scenario 1? I mean, if we've got the TIF revenue to support it, even if we've got to figure out where the rest of the cash is going to come.
Well, cash sitting around in a reserve is certainly losing money.
Right now.
I mean, if we're just thinking we need to have $1 million sitting there, it's gonna be 850 next year.
Well, and that's why we've been collecting that money, right? I mean, to do these projects. So,
I guess it's an important one. So, that still gives us still a little bit of.
it gives us a nimble, so it just feels like if we did scenario one, it's just, I'm assuming we're a little bit more nimble because we've already financed to some extent.
Yeah, so essentially in scenario one, you would issue a bond maxing out your TIF stream with certain parameters as far as what the bond purchaser would be looking for. And we could do that and allow in the legal documents that Rich puts together, project description for land purchase for plaza, and then, that you would know that you would have some portion of the plaza project monies coming back to you.
Well, we know our due diligence on the property purchase ends in 60 days, and we either need to close or terminate. So that's coming right down the pike. So we need to be ready for that. And if interest rates are rising, and we can lock in a bond now that covers both the plaza and that, I think that's the smart thing to do.
Yeah, and we actually, some banks are doing 60-day locks. So even if we could get in with one of those, would be ideal.
I can't think of anything that's more important than those two projects.
I would agree.
Yeah, so even if it makes us not, if we have to sit on the sidelines for a little bit to let things collect again, that's.
We sat on the sidelines for a while.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, if we get those two things, plus the property purchase should at some point generate,
Absolutely.
something. So, I mean, that's the investment in the future there.
That's why we're here. So.
All right.
Okay, so I can go forward with updating this feasibility with the assumption that we're gonna max out that TIF, just to see and move forward with that, a portion for the land purchase of 2.1, and then the rest would go to the plaza project, and then the difference, we can talk through options as far as what it would need to get you there.
Yeah, we'll hold a bake sale or something. It'll be fun.
So as far as timing, I know Rich is not here, but I believe he had sent around the time, kind of a draft timetable, no dates, but just kind of date counts on the side. So as far as timing, we will need to go back in to your plan and add these projects to your plan. So it will require an amendment of your plan. It will not require the full tax impact statement and such, because you're not planning to change your boundaries of your TIF area, but it will require you to add these projects to your plan. So step one would be amending declaratory resolution to add these projects to your plan at maybe your May 12th meeting we talked about, if you're willing to move forward with that. And then the process for the amendment of the plan, again, is RDC, Planning Commission, Council, back to RDC. So you'll still have to do those 4-step meeting process, but Rich has in here kind of adding in the bond steps within those. So I would say, I don't know if we could hit your May 12th RDC meeting for even the initial bond resolution, but if we could do that, would you guys be comfortable with? So the legal documents that you will put together will be based on maximum financial parameters. So we would provide those to them after we get our feasibility updated. So they could look higher than what we show you, but it will cover you if for some reason some things change, you want to find an additional revenue source that you don't have to go back through the legal process. So I would think we could probably get all of that done before your May 12th meeting if you're ready to take action on the amendment of the plan and the bond resolution. And then on the bond side of things too, we'll need to go to the council as well for their blessing. But
And just one more quick question, if I may. Andrew, is this the right step from the council's perspective and based on your experience, scenario one, right? Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna be refinancing the purchase of the land with another bond, hopefully, if we do it right in the next year.
Yeah.
And then you'll get the money back, and the plaza, any shortfall in the plaza, we can work on that, because it's not gonna be millions and millions of dollars, and so that's the reason why we did not bond the entire Cat Park, so that we kept some more cash in reserve for that type of thing.
so one thing that is important for us to remember, and we'll make sure to negotiate on your guys' behalf is, as we have talked about before, doing an RFP out for local banks to get this done in kind of a timely fashion. If we can get interest rates back that we feel are competitive in nature. But the redemption provision or a call provision is one thing that we'll have to negotiate, which is the provision that allows you to either refinance the bond issue or pay off the bond issue early. And so typically on a 20-year, 25-year deal, we would see like an 8 to 10-year call provision, meaning you couldn't pay a portion of it off until 8 to 10 years. If you request something shorter than that, and normally local banks are more willing to negotiate with that, sometimes you can see a slight tick up in the interest rate because of kind of you paying for the chance that you're going to pay a majority of those bonds off early. Because the bank or the purchaser of those bonds wants some guarantee that they're going to hold the bond for a certain period of time to make a certain level of interest. So, in all of the term sheets and stuff that we are drafting on your behalf, that we'll make sure to make that negotiable.
Essentially, it's a prepayment penalty.
Yeah.
The period.
So you're gonna negotiate to try and minimize that as much as you can, because that's the goal, right?
Yep.
And that's very utility deliverable, right?
Yes, so, so we will put together an RFP, it looks like a term sheet, with the financials behind it. You guys will sign it, it'll look like it's coming from you, even though it's distributed by us. You guys will provide us the list of banks, that you know locally that you work with. We will add on banks that we see buy municipal bonds in Indiana like this, and send it to that list of banks, give them a couple weeks to respond. And then we'll give you a summary of what proposals you received. More than likely, you'll want to choose the lowest interest rate, and then we move towards closing 2 weeks later. So, okay, so I know my marching orders as far as updating the feasibility, getting that done for you guys. And then I can direct Rich on your guys' behalf to start pulling together the resolutions and amending declaratory resolution for you for your May 12th meeting. I have given Bethany and Julie the agreement for us to do the work, which again, I had presented at your February meeting.
It's also given to them this morning. So that was the extra packet that was included on top.
You had given us the blessing, but I don't know if formally you signed that or not.
I think so.
I don't think we ever received the final signed copy of it back.
So we'll just make sure to take care of that today.
We don't have a signed copy. But
We didn't have a signed copy.
oh, okay, which is totally fine. It's not a big deal. So we have that today.
So what's the process like for banks, for us to give you a list of banks?
So we will we'll send you guys a letter that basically says, provide us a list of banks that you want us to contact so that it's kind of in formalities in writing. And then we'll add a list to that. So the first step will be updating the feasibility, getting a draft out to Julie and the town folks for them to take a look at. And then at your May 12th meeting, we'll be back with that feasibility. Rich will have the legal documents to start the process. And then if we think the council is going to bless their resolution and you guys feel comfortable moving forward with us going out to local banks, we can do that. Some redevelopment commissions want us to wait until the council has made their approval before we go out to banks. So really just I
Need to wait.
think that everyone's on board here.
Need to wait.
Need to wait, okay.
Well, at least we need to have a presentation of the plaza at our next meeting and then explain it to our council. This is new for our council,
Okay,
so.
perfect. So we would wait until the council approval. Rich will actually plug in dates into the legal procedural timetable so you guys know what we're following. That will lay out bond sale, all of that timing.
We just need to be ready to close 30 days from the due diligence date, which is June something.
Please, June 12th.
That's what I was thinking,
I
so.
was gonna ask, is that gonna fit in time schedule?
Well, that's what I want to, yeah, I think we're okay, because I know we ran that by Rich last time when he was here, and we were good. We had plenty of time, but now it seems like
Yeah.
it's inching closer.
So you
But
can always,
we basically have 90 days.
Eric, we can always do special meetings if we need to, but there are some statutory timeframes where he has to have a certain amount of
Right.
You know,
So
in between.
the closing deadline is probably July 12th.
So if Rich can make sure that if we need to do any special meetings,
Yeah.
it would be more for the RDCs, councils every 2 weeks, essentially.
Well,
Because the planning commission also has to be involved, correct?
Yeah, the plan commission more for the amendment of the plan, essentially just adding these projects into the plan so that you can use TIF monies for this.
Just one meeting for them, I think.
Yes. Yep, so I'll get with Rich, he can update the timetable, we'll be here at your May 12th meeting, and we'll be in communication probably between then. So,
awesome. Thank you.
yeah.
All right. Updates from the Department of Development.
I believe that's in the packet today. We have seen, you'll see the work starting across the street here. P&L has started construction. We also have some new construction out south of Landing, north of CVS. So moving forward out there. As far as new projects that are being filed, there are a couple of smaller rezonings that are on the residential side. 2-lot, 3-lot residential subdivisions coming in. Should be on plan commission this month. From the development department, and it will filter down to you folks, the Unified Development Ordinance. So they've been working on that project for close to a year now. That will be, initial presentation will be this month at Plan Commission to kind of give the preview of what's in that new document. One of the things that I think will impact this board the most is there will be a new kind of overlay district specifically for downtown so that we can have some regulations to try to encourage and have a specific look and feel for downtown. There also will be something for the I-69 corridor. So we'll be happy to share that document if you'd like to look at that. But Mark, I believe you had a copy and been involved in that process. If you care to comment.
No, just it's needed.
It's needed.
Can you share that?
Yeah, we'll be happy to send that out. But
When did you say that is? Because that'll impact what they do with the design of the plaza one.
It could potentially, but it is more focused on the buildings and kind of how that form of what materials are used, signage.
Okay.
Those are more of the focus items for downtown. But yeah, I'll be happy to send that out so we can make sure we're going to get the product that we're looking for. Okay?
Thanks, Julie.
Yes, sir.
Next agenda item is a resolution that we will need to table because shockingly the lease is not completed yet. So on that topic though, the latest interest from the interested parties is to have a new schematic drawn up of the layout of the parking lot. The only one we have so far is the one the taxman did. The lessor would like to have some ownership of that design. And so in order to get over the finish line with the lease, we need to accommodate that if we choose to do so. So I need authorization from this board to engage an engineer to do some schematic layout of what that parking lot could or would look like with input from the lessor.
What does he want? I mean, didn't indicate what he didn't like about the current.
I mean, it's his land, and knowing that it's gonna be probably the exhibit to the lease, and it's gonna be a long-term lease, it seems to me to be a reasonable
I
request.
think it's reasonable. I think my only concern is if there's no input run and he doesn't like it, I mean, it's just, I mean, I'm assuming there's some limit on the iterations, like,
We could do that. I mean, I think what we would agree to do is to provide some not to exceed cost on getting the schematic done and that he can have input on that. And then if that doesn't work, maybe we pull a plug on the deal and he can work it out with the taxman on how they want to do that. Maybe it doesn't become a town project at some point.
But we don't know from what Taxman did, we don't know what he does or doesn't like about that, or.
I can't say with 100% certainty, other than I think he needs the comfort of having some ownership on the design. That's maybe a fair way to put it.
Well, I think it's based on the information and the people I've talked to is I think it's fair to say that he's considering developing the rest of his land to the north.
Right.
And that parking's gonna be critical for him, whether it's tenant-based or what. I guess my one question is, the cost that is used to do that, will that be a part of the plan that will go forward from a construction civil design? And is there some payback there or some?
I think it's something we have to eat. I don't know.
It wouldn't, like, who's building that parking lot? I can't remember. We are?
That would be us.
So, I mean, we have to do a design anyway, right, with an engineer?
Well, yes, there will have to be detailed engineered drawings that have not been done yet, because even Taxman hasn't done that. They just did
The part, maybe, is there a little bit of cost that we're gonna have to spend on that anyway from a civil design standpoint?
there
Parking?
will be. I guess the difference was if the takeoff point was the schematic that's already been done, you avoid that cost, and then you do the detailed engineering from that.
And Mark, I think that we did not want to go and spend the money to do a detailed engineering set without having the lease agreed to.
Right.
And now we're being asked to agree to a schematic in order for the lease to be agreed to.
I got you. So the schematic is obviously just something much lighter than the detailed engineering, right?
Correct.
Presumably.
Yes, yeah.
Still,
I mean, we would,
We
I would suggest that,
$500.
it's a not to exceed of like $2,500 and we go
Yeah.
utilize the same engineering firm that's doing some of that other work. And they would probably take care of that as a part of what we're doing. And then under the premise that if it went forward, that they would then get the detailed engineering design work.
That makes sense.
But I think we were trying to avoid spending thousands and thousands of dollars without having an agreement in place.
yeah, which would not be fiscally responsible, so we're not going down that road. All right, so I would need a motion to approve, we should probably say not to exceed $3,000, and then a motion to authorize the disbursement of an amount not to exceed $3,000 to provide a schematic of the parking lot.
So you can do one motion, right?
Yeah.
All right. Make the motion, actually. Remember how to word it.
You can also just say so moved.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion is second. Any discussion? All right, roll call vote, please.
Aye.
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 All right, next order of business, approve, wait, was there something I was gonna say about? There was something, I can't remember what it was now. All right. I'll figure it out.
Sorry about that, Mark.
Oh, I know what it was. It was, we should be pretty close to getting, the phase 2 and the survey, right? Was that?
It's my understanding, Carissa, I believe, said that the survey was due the 22nd and the phase 2 was the 25th approximately of April.
Okay.
So it should be coming around in the next couple of weeks.
All right, those were the prereqs for being able to finish the due diligence. So those were the two remaining pieces that were out there waiting to get done.
So Eric, maybe just take a couple minutes. I mean, we'll get those reports back. Obviously, diligence closes what, June 12th? At at what stage will we have to figure out, like, based on what comes back in those reports, or maybe you've already seen preliminary stuff and there's nothing that's gonna impact, but,
I haven't
okay.
yet. So I mean, so we know, the only thing we have back right now is the title commitment, and there were a lot of works on that. So the sellers are working to cure those. There were tax issues and other things that were clouding the title. In the meantime, we asked for the survey, and then we did a phase 1 environmental, which did show some leakage from the gas station on the west side of 135 into the land that's between the gas station and the liquor store. So that's the phase 2, and they're doing that now just to make sure that that wasn't anything that's concerning. And then the survey really is to show encroachments and easements and other issues that might, because you carve out the right of way, you carve out easements and setbacks and things, we need to make sure we know what's developable. Because that's the big piece of what we're trying to do.
So as far as the environmental stuff, it's just that seepage from the.
That was the main issue.
And then is that a thing we've got to negotiate with the sellers or the country market?
It really depends on, it's a country market issue.
Yeah.
And they actually had an item deal where they were supposed to, I think what happened was, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was discovered several years ago, they had a plan in place to remediate it, and they did like part of it. And it sort of fell off the map and nobody followed up. So I think that's what the phase 2 will end up showing, is whether or not that remediation needs to be continued or if it's a done deal. And that honestly could be a deal breaker.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked. If it's like, do we go to IDEM and say, you got 14 Scott? Just trying to.
It's an action between the owner of the land and IDEM. We're out.
Right, we're out, but we don't want to buy it if it's contaminated. So, and I guess a plan B of that is not to break the whole deal. We could purchase just the east side ground.
Or you can purchase it and then go work with IDEM to compel the landowner to actually finish the remediation.
Does the town have any recourse over Country Mark? If they're not,
It's an IDEM action.
Yeah, but the town has no ability to influence.
We can call IDEM and, there's opportunities, but we don't have enforcement ability for environmental.
I didn't know if there were other paths. Okay. And so then, I'm sorry, Mark, I was just
Just based on that land where it's at, our timing with town's development and it being under contract, we know it's petroleum. Andrew, do you see it do you see it could be a situation where we walk away from the west side land?
No.
Okay.
You're not, we're not putting residential homes on there. It's gonna be developed as commercial, so, petroleum is not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's good, but you're not gonna have a open yard where people and children might be living and having those type of concerns, so the
Dry cleaning.
future issues, it's not a dry cleaner, it's not other waste, so your future issues are somewhat mitigated by whoever develops it without large costs. That's really what it comes down to, is you're gonna wind up putting some kind of vapor barrier over it and or a slab, and so that, and then there'll be a commitment, worst case scenario, there's a commitment that it'll have to be hooked to city utilities or town utilities, right? Water and sewer, you can't have a septic or well, we wouldn't allow a septic or a well there in any case. So those kind of things will all process through without issue.
So then I guess my only final question is, again, I'm just thinking of time, June 12th that ends. Do we need to, will we need to do a special meeting or anything based on what comes back, or is that just?
Yeah, I think it depends on what they show.
So they emailed me a couple days ago, and there were no detections of IDEM or CG screening levels, so they're not recommending any additional investigations.
That's awesome. All right, yeah. So really by our May 12 meeting, and we'll put this on the agenda for May 12, is to review those. We'll have all the reports by then, and we can decide whether to move forward or not. We can always close early if everything's clean and clear. You don't have to wait until the end of the lines, but we just have to wait.
Yeah.
We have the money.
Yeah, you'll use every day.
Closing that $20 million property in Miami, but they're cash for it.
All right, any other questions? Fantastic. Next item is the approval of minutes from our March 10 meeting. Everybody have the opportunity to review those. Any additions, corrections, changes? If not, I will accept the motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes from the March 10th meeting.
A motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And the final item is budget review and expense approval. We have expense vouchers from legal, from Alton Witzig, from REA, and somebody else.
I believe it's Crossroads.
Yes.
Crossroads.
Oh, Crossroad, which all have been to do authorized work. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about those? If not, then we'll have a motion to approve those vouchers.
I'll make a motion to approve vouchers.
Motion, do we have a second?
One second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Aye.
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 All right, fantastic. Anybody have anything else for the good of the cause before we close out? Next meeting, Thursday, May 12th, it's going to be jam-packed and action filled. All right, that's it. We are adjourned.